Welcome everyone to the Health, Happiness and Planet podcast, where we explore different ways to boost your well-being, live a more fulfilling life and protect our planet. This podcast is sponsored by Wave Business Excellence Footprint, the digital training company that cares about your development and the well-being of our environment. You can find the courses for employees and managers under the website www.wave-bef.com. In today's episode, we're going to focus on the planet. For that topic, I feel honored to present you to an amazing guest. His name is John Pabon, who lives in Melbourne, Australia. He has spent over 2 decades in the business of saving our Earth. After leaving his role at the United Nations, he traveled the world studying the impacts of sustainability firsthand in factories, on the fields, and at the Fortune 500s. That has given him a unique perspective on what it takes to make a positive impact. John is a globally recognized expert in sustainability with a mission to move from theory to practical strategies that help people and businesses make real impact. To get there, he shares his message through books, consulting to businesses, and keynote speaking to audiences around the world. He is also a regular contributor to major publications such as CNN, Euronews, and the ABC. He speaks to an array of global audiences on issues of sustainability, geopolitics, communications, and societal change. John is a program director for the Conference Board's Asia Sustainability Leaders Council. He is a member of the United Nations Association of Australia, and he serves on the board of advisors to the US Green Chamber of Commerce. He is the author of Sustainability for the Rest of Us, Your No BS 5-Point Plan for Saving the Planet. The book has been described as a foundational read for practical sustainability in the 21st century and one of the best sustainability resources available to date. He is also helping consumers make smarter decisions through his second book called The Great Greenwashing, which is out now. I'm thrilled to introduce you to this amazing guest, John. Hi, John, and welcome to the Health, Happiness and Planet podcast. It's so great to have you here.
Juan, thanks so much for having me. Great to speak.
Thanks for your time. And I was looking at your profile and it was just mind-blowing. I was so amazed to see your trajectory and where you started and where you are today. Could you give us an overview how this happened and how did you actually arrive to where you are today?
It's been a crazy journey, that's for sure. I started originally, and my professional career was always geared towards politics, so I studied political science in school and in my master's programs, but certainly for working at the United Nations. That was always the goal. And I ended up working at the United Nations for several years, which was amazing. But after a few years there, my mentors said that to move up in the organization, you kind of have to go outside and get a bit more professional experience. I was fresh out of grad school. I hadn't worked anywhere else in my entire life. So that's what I did. I took a step out and I went into the consulting world. So working with the likes of McKinsey and AC Nielsen, but always with their public sector clients. So I never lost that sort of altruistic side of the work that I do. But all of that changed and turned on its head when I moved to Shanghai. It would have been 2009. So I had to learn how to use all of that public sector experience that I gathered in New York and Los Angeles and growing up in the US in a very commercial city like Shanghai. Shanghai is capitalism on steroids. So there is no way they were going to do anything around the public sector. It's not their thing. That's up in Beijing. But I fell into sustainability because that's a good little mashup of the public sector and the private sector. So that was even before I think we called it sustainability. It was CSR or philanthropy was what most people called it. And I know today people come out of school with degrees in sustainability, which is amazing. I'm much older than that. So I'm old school sustainability, and that's how I fell into it. And the rest is history. I thought I would be in Shanghai for a few years. It ended up being 10. And I caught the travel bug and just decided to spend a large part of my career overseas outside the US, really looking at sustainability. And I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit more in a sec, but looking at sustainability firsthand. So versus just having an academic discussion about sustainability, really wanting to get in and see it. So working Certainly in boardrooms, I work with corporations mostly, but inside factories, a lot of my experience has been in and out of factories and also on farms. So spending a bit of time living on a palm oil plantation in Borneo, for example. So really wanting to get in there and see the actual work that's happening, not just have an academic discussion. But today's academic discussion is going to be good, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, and that's when you wrote then your first book, which is called Sustainability for the Rest of Us. I think there's this other part that's called the No Bullshit 5-Point Plan for Saving the Planet, right?
That's exactly right. And
That is so amazing. I love that title.
Thanks. It gets me in trouble on Amazon and when I try to promote because of the profanity, but it works. It gets people's attention. And that was the goal, is to try to help people understand, okay, all this stuff is going on. What am I actually supposed to do about it? Because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what's realistic and what every individual can actually contribute.
And I think that's really underestimated, what each single person things they can do, because a lot of people, they just rely on, oh, that will be the government who's going to take care of that, or that's probably going to be the regulatory agencies who will be taking care of that, and everything is going to be fine because I'm just in my little bubble doing my work, getting my salary and trying to have a good life, and the others are in charge of the environment and keeping everything safe and healthy for us. And that's exactly which I think it's just the wrong mindset to have. And I think that's something that you also portray in your book, and to show everybody that actually we should not be waiting for governments to do the move or for companies to do better things. We are the ones who actually can dictate the direction. And could you tell us a bit more, like how's the overview of that 5-point plan?
Sure, absolutely. And I'll start off by talking about how I define sustainability, just so we're on the same page, because if I ask 5 people to define sustainability, I'll get 100 different answers. So for me, sustainability is a catch-all term. So it's anything that involves building a better future. That could be the green side of things. So that's the one that gets the lion's share of the PRs, the green side, the environmental side, but that's just one part. There's an entire social side that's involved in sustainability. That's primarily where I worked when I was in China. So working on human rights, labor rights, all those things, animal rights included, is all part of the social part, the philanthropy. And then there's the boring stuff, but the important stuff, the governance. So how all of this is monitored, tracked, and communicated. So there's a lot more than just hugging the trees and saving the polar bears. It's much broader than that. And that's the point that I start with in the first book, Sustainability for the Rest of Us, is to really encourage people, number one, to get on the same page with what we're talking about. Because if we're not speaking the same language, it's going to be pretty impossible to do anything meaningful together. So that's definitely point number one. And a bigger part of really understanding how we can make a positive difference, I don't necessarily in the book go into specific details like, oh, recycle this many times a day, or, don't shop here, shop there. That's fine. People can figure that out on their own. And I think that's something that people have to come to on their own. It's more of a switch in mindset. So one of the other big points, and something as I describe myself as being a pragmatic altruist. So really caring, having your heart on your sleeve, wanting to do better, but being very strategic and pragmatic about it, because we're only one person, right? We only have so much time and capacity, sanity to be able to do stuff. If I wanted to do everything, I would run out of time and I'd probably just burn out. And it's the same for everybody. Everybody cares, right? Everybody cares about something. Everyone's passionate about something that will change the world. I don't think we have to feel as if we need to do it all. We should feel comfortable in the knowledge that we're not alone. There's an entire army of people behind us that care just as much. So they'll pick up maybe where we don't. So really to find people's focus areas, to find the part that you're most passionate about, most experienced in, that you can contribute to, or if you're financially well off, amazing, congratulations, something you can contribute money to, because all these things are important. And then certainly to dig in and to just do. Because a lot of times people try this and they try that and they do this and they do that. And that's fine. But I think there comes a point where you need to stop that and just do something, to really commit to doing something and contribute to one particular thing. It's just helpful overall. It's certainly helpful for your own sanity, but for the organizations you're working with, especially those at the local level, it's much more helpful if they know that they're going to see you coming back week after week after week instead of just popping in and out once a year. So those are some of the big points kind of rolled up into one of the 5-point plan, but really changing how people look at sustainability, look at saving the planet, and look at their own individual contributions to it.
Wow, that's really amazing. And I was able to identify some of those points that you mentioned on my own standpoint at that moment, because in the past I was working in the corporate world and I was always training people how to become better project managers. And later on, I was also head of CSR in that company, head of innovation and other topics. But when I wanted to make the next step, my wife and I, we said, well, let's put up a company where we will still be training employees and we'll be still certifying them as project managers, but we would like to push it more towards that direction of being more sustainable and helping others become more sustainable. And that's where we saw that a lot of companies know which direction they have to go. They know their SDG goals, they know their sustainability program that they would have to do for the next couple of years, but many of them, they do not have the skills within their workforce on how to actually achieve those steps and how to get there. And that's where we said, okay, let's put up a company where we can help them and give them the skills to those employees so that they can achieve those SDG goals, so they can get closer to their sustainability and corporate social responsibilities. And that's why I think it was really very important what you just mentioned about your book, where everybody has to see where they are and what skills do they have and where can they contribute. Yeah, some can contribute with money, others can contribute maybe with their past skills that they have, like in my case, or maybe others just have a passion that is just really being, let's say, an influencer on pushing this topic forward and bringing the awareness to others. That's really great. And if you look at that 5-point plan, which is the one which you say it's the closest to your heart?
It's definitely the pragmatic altruism, because, again, it's how I describe myself to people, but it's also the hardest one to stick to, because there is I would love to, adopt every dog on the street, feed every homeless person, and go read to kids on the weekends. I would love to do it all. But I know that my little part of the sustainability universe is to be a speaker and author and to work with corporations. And that's it. So really getting over that mindset barrier of feeling as if you're being heartless by not contributing, when in reality, by me sticking to my lane, by everyone else sticking to their lane, you can actually contribute so much more than if you're trying to do just piecemeal a million different things. And it's the same with corporations. We're talking about individuals now, but as you mentioned before, corporations trying to do these things, a lot of times corporations feel like they have to do everything. All these 50 things are important to my business. Yeah, they might be, but you can't do 50 things, because if you try to do everything, you're going to accomplish nothing. So really finding what's most material to your business, what's most important to your stakeholders, and focusing on those, it usually ends up being 3 or 5 different things. So it's not a big list of stuff, but still sticking to your lane and really focusing on, I don't know, if you're, for example, DuPont or GE, or you have a really intricate value chain, okay, how do I shore up my value chain to make it the most sustainable value chain in the private sector, versus just trying to do little bits here and there, I think is much more important.
So true. And from there on, you then wrote your second book, which is, I think, not too far apart from your first book, right? How much break did you have between the first and the second book?
It feels like it was nothing, but I'm sure I gave myself at least a year. No, it was, let me see. It's the first time I thought about this, actually. So I launched the first book in 2020 as COVID was getting going. That's right. And then I had a bit of time, obviously, during lockdowns here in Melbourne, where I am now. We were a very locked down city, so I had plenty of time to sit around doing things. And I think it was probably about a year and a half before I started putting words on paper again with the next book. And then this book has just launched actually last week across much of the Commonwealth. There's a bit more to do because of crazy licensing things, but it'll be out in North America and the rest of Europe, I think sometime early next year. But it's there. It's literally sitting behind me. It's that green one. For anybody looking at this.
Yeah, the green one. Yeah. Wow, amazing. Well, first of all, congratulations
Thanks.
for the launch of your second book, which is called The Great Greenwashing. And could you give us more details about what's the book about and what we can expect as readers?
Absolutely. So as we've come out of the other end of COVID, and yes, I know very well that we're still in the middle of COVID. I'm not a COVID denialist. I know we're still grappling with it, absolutely. But as we're coming out the other end of it, a lot of people in the sustainability profession noticed a big uptick in greenwashing. What is greenwashing? Greenwashing is when corporations, they decide to say they're sustainable when really the reality is probably not so green. So they essentially want to make money off of lying to consumers. That's kind of what it is boiled down. And there's been a massive uptick in that over the past year. So I thought, okay, I know this is an issue. Let's start researching and see if there's legs to creating a book out of it. And I thought I would just focus on the corporate sector. And believe me, the corporate sector, there's plenty of case studies of them lying to you. And I've sort of differentiated and segmented them out into kind of the worst of the worst. These are the oil companies, defense contractors, tobacco companies, these companies that no matter what they do, they won't be sustainable until they put themselves out of business. So those are kind of the lost cause companies. Then there are those that are probably on the better end of things, not perfect, but better. So those in highly regulated industries like finance or medtech or pharma, not perfect, but better. Then there's everybody else in the middle. So there's plenty of material in there on the corporate sector. But as I started to peel back the layers, I realized, oh my gosh, it's not just them. It's governments and it's international organizations. It's FIFA, it's the UN, it's Davos. They're all doing it. And then peeling it back even more, I thought, oh my gosh, I forgot about celebrities. They're doing it too. And social media influencers, everybody is doing this. So it's not just corporations that make a cameo in the book. It's everybody is doing it. I even include a section on all of us individually just to do a little bit of a check to make sure we're not greenwashing, because it's very easy to accidentally do it. So that's a bit about what the book is. I certainly do give an explainer and I go into detail on what greenwashing is, how to identify it, how to watch out for it. And as I'm taking a step back and listening to some of the stuff we've been talking about, I am a positive person, even though a lot of the work we're doing is really, there's lots of barriers and banging heads against walls. I am a positivist and I do believe things are going in the right direction. I think it's really important, though, that as consumers especially, we're able to arm ourselves with the right information so we can make the right decisions.
Exactly. And I think that's really the major big first step to make everybody aware about what they're doing, and they can make conscious decisions at the end. Yeah, because before the internet was out there, many did not really have a choice because they just were guided upon whatever was on newspapers or magazines or wherever they could get their hands on. But now that we have the access to World Wide Web and we can really start digging which is the truthful information that I should know, then hopefully consumers will really be able to make much better decisions in the future. Well, if I think back in the time when I was speaking about sustainability, that was like probably 35 to 40 years ago. And my wife as well, she actually studied environmental protection at the university, but she had no clue what she was going to do with that profession. She had absolutely no people to actually correlate about that topic. So at the end, she just ended up working in banking industry. But if I think today, like 3 decades later, it's so many more people you can actually speak to them about it, and they know about a topic, they could say a couple of things about it, and that they're doing maybe 2 or 3 things that are more direction sustainability. So I do have the feeling that we are really moving slowly but surely towards the right direction.
Absolutely agree. And I do quite a bit of outreach and work on TikTok because of the reach to that generation. But what I've found through a lot of that is it's not just the younger generation. It's not Gen Z and Alpha that are the only ones that care. It's also the quintessential boomers. It's Gen X, it's everybody cares. So that's a great thing because, like you said, I think the access to information has helped us tremendously to all care a bit more. And yes, I'm very well aware that today, if you want to be sustainable, if you're listening to this and you're on the fence saying, oh God, I don't want to, I understand it takes research. It takes paying more when you go to the shelf. It's not easy. But if I had a bit of a crystal ball and looking at the work I do with corporations day in and day out, we're entering a virtuous cycle where corporations are now not just competing on making money, but they're competing on being better, and not just lying about being better, actually being better because they know it makes sense to be sustainable. So in 10, 15 years' time, I don't think there are going to be as many unsustainable corporations. I think when you go to the grocery store or go shopping, 90% of the work's going to be done for you. You just have to make a decision. So unfortunately, we're in that little period of time now where we have to sort of sit on our hands and wait, but it's going to change in the not too distant future. And I'm really positive about that. That's my positive message to balance out all the negative.
Yeah. That is so good because I think one really has to have that positive outlook and that positive attitude. I have it as well. And I think to what also you have mentioned that in the past, if somebody as an employee would get a job at a company, they wouldn't really care about what the company is doing that much. Main thing that they can get the job and they get a salary out of it. But I think today's generation, they're saying, what is this company actually contributing to our society? And do I identify myself with this corporation? And can I work for this kind of people? And they now have the choice. Yeah, do I want to work with someone who's contributing to something not so good, or somebody who's really pushing the needle forward for our better future?
That's exactly right. And I think that's the important part too, is to your earlier point about let's call it the quintessential people power, right? The power that we have over making change. That's a big part of it too. So it's not just the consumer people power forcing corporations to be better, which is sort of what's happened, and that's fine. Ends justify the means justify the ends, and justify the means. But it's also from inside the organizations where people are demanding better of the places that they work. So they will just turn around, and especially post-pandemic, people aren't going to just stand for, any corporations messing around, which is a great thing. That's what we want to see.
Yeah, correct. While you were explaining all those different layers that you're going through about all these different sectors who are doing greenwashing, and it's not just the corporations, but then also influencers and so forth, I was just getting goosebumps just listening to all of that. Could you tell us some of the greenwashing techniques that companies apply to deceive the consumers?
Absolutely. And if somebody listening to this goes out and Googles greenwashing, you're going to get lots of articles that sound kind of cute, like the 7 cardinal sins of greenwashing or the 10 commandments of greenwashing, all this sort of stuff. There's too many numbers. So it's way too confusing. So like I did in my first book, I tried to boil it down to make sense of it, because a lot of times those of us in the profession, yourself, myself included, we get lost in our jargon and we forget there's people that need to understand this stuff. So I boiled it down into another number, but 3 kind of big buckets of ways that corporations or governments or even influencers try to deceive you. So the first is green speak. And this is the one we're probably most exposed to. So it's how marketing departments position products. It could be the language that's used on the back of a package that is quite confusing, or uses lots of numbers or jargon, or says that we're 50% more recycled, but they don't tell you what the starting point was, so it could be nothing at all. There's the corporations that like to use the color green for their packages, or cute pictures of pastures or cows or animals, all these sort of things that in our mind, through what we call in marketing semiotics, which is the interpretation that consumers have of pictures, it makes you think, oh, this brand must be good just because they have a picture on something. No, it's not that easy. So this is the green speak part of it, and there's plenty of other types of examples as well. The second type is misdirection. So having a consumer look at maybe the small good things that a company is doing, but hopefully ignoring all the other bad stuff that's happening behind the scenes. And I like to think of the Wizard of Oz when I give this example. You have Dorothy and all her little friends on the Yellow Brick Road. They make it to the Emerald City, and they're standing before the great and powerful Oz. And it's a big head, there's smoke, there's fire, it's loud, they're scared. And the little dog Toto goes to the side to a green screen and pulls it back. And there's the old man pulling a bunch of levers and pretending he's something he's not. And he says, pay no attention to the man behind the screen. And that's exactly what a lot of these greenwashers are doing. They're just saying, pay no attention to all this stuff. Look over here at what I want you to look at. And then the third one is the most insidious of all, and something that really blew my mind when I started to do a bunch of research on greenwashing, is green scamming. So this is nuts. There are actual groups out there that seem like they're proper environmental or sustainable NGOs or organizations, consultancies, but they're actually lobby groups for highly polluting industries. So they're funded by them, they work for them, and they essentially, and I hate that I'm about to use this phrase because it's overused these days, but they present fake news and research to discredit any sort of sustainability that's out there, which was, I knew it happened, I didn't realize the extent to which that it happened. So green speak, misdirection, and green scamming are the 3 big ways that all of these different stakeholders are trying to deceive consumers.
That's quite scary to hear that. I think that's also the problem today, even though it's an advantage to have the World Wide Web and all that information. But then the downside is, how do you filter all of that information that you find? And how do you know which is the right one and which is the one that you really have to be careful with? How do you actually differentiate that when you're doing your research and when you really... I know a lot of times one says just follow the money and see who created that article, who's writing it, and just try to go a little bit down that rabbit hole. How do you actually manage to find the truthful path?
It's so difficult, right? It does, as I was saying before, it takes research. And honestly, who has the time? Like, I just want to go buy a box of tea. I don't want to have to follow a money trail to see who funded the thing. So I totally get that. As a realist, I wouldn't call myself someone who sits on the activist side of sustainability. More power to all the activists. But, I'm just an everyday person too, and I don't have time to do all that research. So I don't know, honestly, what it takes to get people to know which products are the right ones. I certainly encourage people to speak with their wallet. But again, to my earlier point, to do that the right way, you have to do a bit of research. One good way to do that, and one good way that organizations have been helpful in getting us past that research barrier, are these stamps of approval that exist on a lot of packaging. So most people would have probably seen that at some point and maybe thought nothing of it, but the Rainforest Alliance with the little tree frog, there's the Forest Stewardship Alliance with a tree on a package, there's even the B Corps. A lot of times packages will have a big B on the package, and that indicates that that organization is an ethical, sustainable, good organization, so you can be confident in your purchasing of that. But one of the other big aha moments in the research is, as these have sort of proliferated, and as consumers have become smarter with making purchase decisions, marketing teams have had to become even more slick with what they're doing. So many of them have created their own stamps of approval that are not backed by anything. It's just a marketing department created a cute little graphic on Canva and put it on a package. So just even with that, be careful and really know what it is you're buying. So if you go with that, look for the bee, look for the frog, or look for the tree, and you should be good. Those cover a lot of different corporations.
That's right. Wow. And do you know if any of those three companies, the one with the bee and the frog and the tree, if they also take like the end-to-end perspective of the product? For example, how is the production to create the product, and then the life cycle of the product itself while it's in use by the consumer, and then what is the afterlife? Or do they only look at the perspective of the consumer part?
It's a really great question. So for the frog and the tree, I think much of that, and I may be speaking out of turn, so do your research. Don't just trust what some guy tells you on the internet. They may just focus on the supply chain and logistics part of things. But for the B Corporation, I'm actually in the middle of doing a B Corp certification for a client of mine right now. And that'll do your head in with the amount of detail they want from end to end, which is amazing. The granularity they get into to ensure that you're an ethical, sustainable organization. So that the B is definitely end to end, from the foundation of your company all the way through how consumers use your products. One of the barriers that I'm facing right now, it's not really a barrier because there's no problems, but one of the certifications I need to get this client to get the B Corp certification is to ensure that the corporations they work with are ethical corporations as well. So it goes into second tier, third tier, fourth tier suppliers to ensure that everything throughout end to end is great. So trust the B. Always trust the B. They're the best of the lot.
Okay, perfect. I'm so happy to hear that there's something that exists in that form, because I was always thinking to myself, there's so many companies who are just trying to somehow manipulate the consumers to just look at that little window of saying, look, while you're using our product, then it's all going to be good. But the consumer has no clue what happens with that product once I throw it away, so I don't need it. What happens with the creation of that product? How much resources were used, and were they properly paid? Were they properly treated throughout the production? And I'm so happy that really exists. And one of the things that usually strikes, or where I'm doing some research right now, I do not know the answer yet, but maybe you have heard a little bit more about it. If we look up just as a simple product, let's say a vehicle, if we look at a car, and they are promoting a lot of the electric cars, and for me it was always like, okay, I understand the piece when I'm the end user of the car, that in that point of time I'm not emitting so much carbon footprint as with another car. But I was always thinking to myself, how is the production of all these lithium batteries? And then once I'm done with the car and the car is then being disposed of, what's the process of getting rid of those batteries? Is there a process already in place? Yeah. So that's where I start thinking, okay, if I look at it from the end-to-end perspective, is it really better than the normal car or not? Yeah. So I still do not know the answer, but have you seen any research on that?
It's really fascinating, and as we're recording this, it's a few days after World Environment Day, but interestingly enough, Rowan Atkinson, who plays Mr. Bean, for anybody who knows the old, British comedy sketch Mr. Bean, he put an opinion piece in the Guardian newspaper a few days ago about his opinions on electric vehicles. And it's gotten a lot of traction. It's gone sort of viral around the world because a lot of the points he made in saying he trusted them originally, but as he's looked into it, he realizes, oh, it's not so great. Everybody's sort of said, no, you're absolutely wrong. Like, who is this guy? Like, don't trust him. He's not a scientist. He doesn't know what he's talking about, which is true. So, and I'll frame this with the way I approach everything in sustainability is that there is no such thing as perfect. And there's no such thing as flipping the switch to make things perfect tomorrow. It's not going to work that way, right? It takes a lot of time. So our focus should really be not on making perfection or chasing perfection, but are moving the needle in the right direction. And I get this question quite a bit actually around electric vehicles because are they perfect? No, not by a long stretch. There are issues in the resourcing and the mining that goes on, in the production and the embedded carbon, the disposal, like you mentioned. But are they better than a typical combustion engine car that we've been dealing with for 100 years? Absolutely. So it's a move in the right direction. And I certainly with a lot of the clients that I work with in the automotive space, I know that companies are already looking beyond electric vehicles to what's next, to what's even more sustainable. So they're trying to get us there. So I would be concerned if all the car companies were sitting back and going, EVs, perfect, we're done. I don't think they're doing that. So a long way to answer your very short question, Juan, is that EVs are better than what we had before, but we shouldn't just sit back and say they're the end goal. We should be looking for what's next.
Yeah, perfect. That's really good to know because I think also, especially in my mindset, I have always that continuous improvement mindset to know that it's not always easy to get to the perfect end station. Yeah. And therefore, just to get there, you really have to do that incremental little improvements. And I'm happy to hear that that is an improvement, but there is still room for improvement.
We just have to be a bit patient. And I know we don't have time to be patient, but that's the reality. That's the game we're playing. So patience.
That's right. And if there is one action point that the listeners could try to implement, what would that be? Because I'm usually the kind of person who like to do very efficient, and I know not everybody has so much time to think about and do so many things for sustainability, but if there's like a small task that people can do to have a big impact for our environment, what would that be?
I think for me, it's more of a message because I think people will find those action points within themselves, depending, what they're passionate about, like we were talking about a little while ago. And I don't want to push people one way or the other, but as a message, I want people to not fall into the climate doomism that's everywhere around the world. A lot of people are despondent. As sustainability marketers, we've done a terrible job at marketing. You think about traditional sustainability marketing, it's the polar bear on the melting ice cap, it's the desert dystopian future sort of thing. That doesn't do a lot to encourage people to change. And I would definitely encourage everybody that you can still make a very big difference. Don't be despondent. Don't fall into the doomism. Don't think that everything is just the die is cast and we're all screwed. No. Is it going to be perfect? Are we going to live in this sort of Edenville in the future where everybody lives on a farm and it's all sort of a socialist utopia? No, that was never going to happen. That was never the goal. Is it going to be like Mad Max where or the Hunger Games or something like that? No, it's not going to be that either. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. The Earth will survive, we will survive, but we'll have to adapt. And we're seeing that already. We're seeing ways that we are adapting to a changing world. So that's the positive message, is we can still make a positive difference, even if you might see things talking about, the UN said we're already past the 1.5 degree limit, or other organizations saying sort of the same things. That's okay. It's not great. It's not where we want to be, but it doesn't mean that we still can't make a difference. So definitely don't fall for the doomism and know that whatever you do that's helping out the future is actually making a big difference.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and I think it's also very important for people to remember the things that we have also achieved in the past, because when I was in high school, in those days, it was really a big topic about those holes in the ozone layer. And today it's like 3 decades later, and we say, okay, it did get better, our ozone layer. So that means that we can make a difference, we can make a change. And that's something encouraging that sometimes people forget about. I try to be careful not to come into this paralysis because, as you said, marketing companies are putting so many pictures out there that people just get so scared that they get into this paralysis and then just say, well, I cannot do anything. It's already all over. It's game over. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And it's definitely not game over at all. Yeah.
No. It's more like game on.
It's I love that. Yes, it's not game over, it's game on. I'm putting that on a t-shirt one.
Excellent. Well, I'm so glad we got that one because that was actually part of my next question. Yeah, how do we make a better marketing for people so they're more encouraged to go that direction? Because I think that there are a lot of wrong ways of doing marketing, on giving that awareness to people. I would say many people react on different ways of marketing, and some react under pressure when people give a lot of pressure on them and they do a lot of violent images and screaming on the streets. And others, they reject that because they get scared and get scared away. They just say, okay, this is not my kind of gang. And I think there's so many different methods out there. What do you think is one of the good ways of promoting the awareness of this topic?
Absolutely. You hit a really great point a second ago as well that leads very well into this, is the fight against the hole in the ozone layers. So it does make a cameo in the new book, because that was a time where we all got together to fight this existential threat, this hole that was going to burn up the earth. And it worked. Like you said, 30 years later. Yeah, it oscillates. Yes, technically, scientifically, there is still a hole. But we worked together to make a difference and to close, essentially, the hole in the ozone layer. And I think what's happened since then and why we face such an uphill battle when it comes to the communications and the conversion, getting people to change, is up to a few things. So first, and a way is to frame things, I think we need to remember, especially those of us in sustainability, especially in the activist community, that after 60, 70, 80 years of the modern environmental movement, it's no longer about convincing people that something's going on. Honestly, if at this stage people ignore that there's something going on or they refuse to believe you, they're a climate denialist, I don't have time for you, right? I have enough to worry about. I'm not going to try to convince you. It's not about that anymore. It's about converting people to action, which is, again, what you alluded to a second ago. It's converting people to action. So how do we do that? How do we have another ozone layer moment? And I think it comes down to a few things. Number one, it's, as I mentioned in my first book, it's getting in lockstep about what it is we're trying to do, because right now the problem is massive. It's not just even one problem. There are a million problems we're facing. So it's not so easy if we aren't all focused on a common thing. Saving the planet, that's too big, right? So the second point then is to break it down into something that's manageable, like the ozone layer. Great, I have an enemy that I know I'm fighting against. We need to do the same thing now. We might not be able to do everything, right? But we need to have some sort of a common enemy to fight against that people can understand. And then third, explaining what it is that people can do. And also understanding there will be people that don't want to do anything. That's okay. That's totally cool. But for the people who do want to do stuff, the people that do want to get involved, or even those that are on the fence, how? What can they do? How do we mobilize, in the language of activists and political scientists, how do we mobilize these people to do things at the local level, at the federal level, at the international level? So those are the three things. It's really to get in lockstep, it's to find an enemy, and then it's to mobilize the forces to do good.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and that's, I think, for anybody who has taken a course on storytelling, I think that's a perfect scenario for storytelling, because in every storytelling, I would say, structure, you always have one person who's having, either it's the planet or it's you as an individual or it's your customer. It has to be someone or something that's having a problem, and how are we going to then solve that problem? Yeah, so that's where we build up on that story. And I think that is probably something really interesting for people to say, okay, now we can identify what is the issue that we need to optimize, and then we just tackle that. Yeah? And people feel more compelled to move that direction than if they just have this big, like over galactical problem that nobody knows, okay, how am I going to actually solve all of those 25,000 problems that we have right there? Better focus on 1, 2, 3 things, but do it well.
Exactly right. I think it's important too that, and this is more for anybody who's a little bit younger than the two of us that's listening, or maybe it's more for us to be doing the promotion, but keep getting the story of the ozone layer out. I think a lot of people have either forgotten about the ozone layer or just don't know about it at all. But that's an amazing story of how we came together to change things. And I think that is super helpful to get people mobilized, because a lot of times, as we were talking about a second ago, if I'm only one of almost 10 billion people on the earth, what am I going to do? But if you then pop in the story about, we actually did something before, this isn't a new idea, then people might go, oh, okay, I guess I can do something.
Yeah, correct. One other question that I have is more direction towards marketing companies. Maybe you know the answer on that one, but I always hope that there are going to be marketing companies out there who will only do marketing for good companies. That the marketing companies say, if I'm going to promote this product that I'm sure that I'm really saying the truth about that product and not just saying anything because the company is giving me the contract and we're getting the money for them, they're paying us, and we're going to make a beautiful scenario about how good this product is. So therefore, I was always thinking, are there actually companies out there who do marketing for companies who only specifically do good marketing? Do you know about those?
They are few and far between, and I hope somebody chimes in and tells me I'm wrong. I would love to know that I am wrong, but I have only come across a very small number that are focused specifically on that. You'll of course have the big marketing and ad and PR firms, the Ogilvies, for example. They have an entire department that focuses on cause-related marketing and good, quote-unquote, stuff, right? They have sustainability department. They have all this stuff. Are they specialists in it? Maybe not. Do they do good work? Yeah, sure, to varying degrees. I'll do the thing my mother told me never to do and answer a question with a question. Do we need specialist ones focused on that, or can we trust the big firms to do it? I am inclined to say no, we can't trust the big firms. So I don't know. I think they're few and far between. But I am, again, hopeful that internal marketing teams at a lot of these big corporations, they're starting to learn and know better. So they know they can't get away with lies. They know they can't get away with flowery language as much as they probably could in the past. So they're much more cautious. And that's a double-edged sword, because it's good to be cautious so that you're not lying or greenwashing. But at the same time, they can potentially be overly cautious and not talk about anything at all, which we don't want either. So we want sort of that happy medium with companies and these PR firms talking about what it is that they're doing. And for any marketers listening, or if Ogilvy is listening to this, it's important to remember that your customers don't expect you to be perfect. They just expect you not to lie to them. That's all. You don't have to be perfect, just don't lie.
Yes, and me as a consumer, I also can totally confirm what you just said.
I want you to be better, but just start basics. Don't lie to me.
So true. I did get to meet a person a couple days ago, and this person worked for a marketing company and told me that this oil company told them that they should go to the rainforest in Brazil and film all the nice things that are happening there with the birds flying and all the nice animals and creatures, and to make that as one of the new marketing campaigns for their company. And she was so shocked about that she just left the company. She said, I cannot do this anymore. I just cannot continue lying. And she just left. And that's, I think, what people really can do for such situations. If they just see that their company is not doing the right thing, then they still have the choice to go to a different company.
Absolutely right. And I think more and more we're going to see that happening, which is exactly what we want. And besides, if you're sitting in a marketing department, you're a marketing professional, like, how condescending is that to have, a firm you've probably paid a 6-figure salary to come in and tell you something so silly as take pictures in the forest? Like, come on now, it's 2023. Be better. If you are going to lie and you're going to greenwash, at least be good at it.
Yeah. Yeah, especially now after your book is out, I think it's going to be harder for anybody to
Hopefully.
Oh, wow. John, so now that you are in marketing for your new book that's coming out, what do you see as the vision for the future? What are your new projects that you have ahead of you?
I think it's really important that I use the opportunity for, and we'll talk business for a sec, using the research I've done, using the information in the book to parlay that then into the corporate sector. I mean, of course, the purpose of the book is to arm consumers with the right information, but at the end of the day, that's fine. But if companies aren't going to change their evil ways, then I've sort of failed in my job. So really to parlay all that information into then helping my current stable of clients or even others to become better at what they're doing, to hopefully speed up this whole process where it won't be 10 to 15 years from now where all decisions will be good ones. It'll be 2 or 3 years from now where all decisions will be sustainable ones. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and that's such an exciting job that you have now. That's like that role that you took in to really help those corporations do the right thing and to help them make the next step and to be Yeah, and this continuous improvement mindset, and not to scare them away by saying, as you mentioned today, being perfect, but just being a little bit better than we were the previous year. And that's already something incredibly large, especially for a corporation, because companies have such a leverage of doing so much good or so much bad. I don't know, just thinking about, let's say, those companies that create those water bottles. And I just think, how many million water bottles are being created every year? But if we can just change the mindset of some of those people who are sitting in that corporation, because they're at the end of the day just people like any one of us, and if they can be more aware about what's happening, then they could maybe make better decisions for the future and say, okay, I'm not going to be using all that plastic material for the water bottles. Maybe I start researching for other companies who can give me an alternative to these plastic bottles, maybe out of other better biodegradable materials. So therefore, yes, that's also my hope, and that's, I think, also my positive attitude, that I think that we will definitely be able to convince a lot of corporations to do the right thing step by step, and that we as a human race will be able to somehow make it through that hard curve and those bumps, but then at some point of time, make it out of this hard time that we are right now.
That's exactly right. We're going to get banged up and bruised, and we're going to get a few skinned knees, but we'll make it around the corner.
Yeah, that's right. Now that we're getting to the end of our episode for today, what are the services that companies can receive from your side, John?
I love this question. Nobody on podcasts ever asks me that. That's great. So what I do is I work with corporations, both small and medium, as well as larger multinationals, on their governance side of sustainability. So looking at their material issues. So in the business, we call that materiality assessments, doing sustainability reporting, especially to encourage no greenwashing in sustainability reports. So crafting and writing and creating these reports, as well as offering communications workshops, now greenwashing workshops, and working on the Marcom side of sustainability with these organizations. So yes, all governance related stuff around sustainability, but thank you for asking me that question. It's always good to do a bit of a sell. Yeah, that's what we do.
Yes.
And I didn't say this in the beginning, but I am the founder and a lead at Fulcrum Strategic Advisors. That's the name of my consultancy, and we do focus on the governance areas and marketing of sustainability. I don't just write.
Yeah.
For any aspiring authors, writing does not pay the bills, so keep your day job.
Yeah, good to know. I'm also writing a book at the moment. I think anybody who's writing a book is only good to know, if you're going to write about something, write something that you really enjoy writing about, because it's not going to make you a millionaire out of it.
Yes.
Yeah. So where can the listeners find you?
Absolutely. So it's easiest just to go to my own website, so johnpabon.com, or you can check out Fulcrum at fulcrum22.com.
Excellent. Then I am going to put that on the show notes for anybody who's not able to take notes at this moment, and they can just click on those links once they finish listening to this episode. And John, I'm just so happy that there are people like you out there who is really trying to make a change for the better future. And I always hope that when people like us, when we get to the end of our lifespan, that we can look back and say, okay, I've did everything what I could in my power to leave this place a better place. I'm sure that will definitely be the case for you.
Oh, that's too kind. Thank you. Thank you so much, Juan, and the inspiring words as well. Absolutely.
And thank you so much for your time today, John.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks. See you soon again. Bye-bye. This was an important and fabulous conversation. I hope this episode with John has given you further insight on the topic greenwashing, who is doing it, and how they're doing it. It is important for us as consumers to know where we are putting our money. Before doing anything else right now, I encourage you to reflect on what has been discussed today and think about your contribution towards making this world a better place. My lesson was that I do not need to get demotivated seeing all of the different problems and feel paralyzed. It is important to do what we can in our own scope and using our own special skills that we have. As we heard in today's conversation, it is not game over, it is actually game on. We should all have the luxury to someday look back at our life and have the satisfied feeling that we contributed in what we could in making this beautiful place a bit better than when we entered it. In the show notes, you will find all the links to where to find John and how to contact him. This podcast was sponsored by Wave Business Excellence Footprint, a digital training company that cares about your career development, your personal development, and the well-being of this planet we call home. On the website www.wave-bef.com, you will find a total of 22 courses. 7 of those are designed for managers and 15 courses are designed for employees who strive to become the leaders of tomorrow. I value your feedback and I would love to hear from you. Please rate, subscribe, and share this episode with those whom you think will profit from this information. Your support means the world to me and it motivates me to keep producing content that adds value to your life. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Big hugs, everyone.